Welcome everyone to our webinar on the very new book, What Does Being Black and Buddhist Tell Us About Chaplaincy? My name is Michael Skaggs and I'm Director of Programs for the Chaplaincy Innovation Lab, and we're very happy to have you with us today. Before I introduce our guests, let me give you a couple of quick reminders, and if you're veterans of the webinars, you know this is all the same. Like most of our events, this is being recorded, and so if you need to leave, or if you miss something you want to come back to, don't worry. We'll send out a recording directly to you automatically within about a week or so. And then second, when we do send out that link, it will have a connection in there to a survey about this event. So if you could just take a few minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, to fill out that survey, that lets us know what you liked, what you might have not liked, and what we can do better in the future. Let me introduce our guests who are going to kick off our conversation today. And like most of our webinars, they'll speak for a bit and then we'll turn to Q&A with the audience. Our first guest is Pamela Ayo Yetunde, who is the founder of Audre Spiritual Care for Women with Cancer. And Ayo and I have been in correspondence for a couple of years in a variety of different ways. So I'm really glad to have you here today with us. And then our other panelist is someone that I hadn't met before, so it's always good to make a new connection. Lama Rod Owens is a teacher for Inward Bound Mindfulness Education, and author and social change activist. We initially had planned to have Cheryl Giles with us today as well. She could not be with us today, so we will proceed with Ayo and Lama Rod. So let me thank you both for your time and your energy that's going into this event. I really appreciate it. Thank you to the entire audience for joining us. As you have questions, use the question function on your GoToWebinar box there on the right. That'll send them in the docket, and then we will get to them in the latter half of the program. I'll turn to you, Ayo.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say that the title of the book is Black and Buddhist. And we're going to talk today about what being Black and Buddhist has to offer chaplaincy. I want to begin also by saying that Lama Rod and I come from different Buddhist traditions, and there are countless Buddhist traditions. So you may hear something completely different from him than you would from me. We're also two different Black people with two similar and different experiences. So you may hear something different from him about being Black that you hear, then you will hear from me. But we're very grateful to the Chaplaincy Innovation Lab for all the work that you're doing, all the innovation that you're offering spiritual care. And thank you for this opportunity to talk from our perspectives of being Black and Buddhist. So yeah, with that, I can either invite Lama Rod to say something, or I can continue with a thought. Lama Rod, let me check in with you.
Well, continue with your thought. I can't wait to hear it.
Oh no. So I was thinking, you know, as chaplains, as people who offer spiritual care from Black and Buddhist perspectives, one of the things that we think about is, what does it mean to be a human being? Yeah. Like, let's start there. From my perspective, to be a human being is a precious experience, one that obviously not other beings get to be. That is not to say that a cardinal is not happy being a cardinal, or a cat is not happy being a cat. But from a Buddhist perspective, there's a belief that if you embody the human being form, then you have the capacity to awaken. And so that's the difference between being human and not being human. And because we have the capacity to awaken, what is it that we are awakening from? We're awakening from a variety of things that cloud our experience of reality, which sometimes gets reduced to being diluted by greed, being diluted by hatred, being diluted by delusion itself. So is a poison. So we try to awaken from these things, and for what purpose? As it relates to spiritual care, so that we can help other people do the same, so that we can help people be liberated from these things. But so from a Buddhist perspective, I think one of the things that we offer chaplaincy is a different way of understanding the human being and the capacity for awakening and having a mind that is unified with the cosmos.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I completely identify and agree with everything, Ayo, that you just shared. And it also brings to mind, too, one of the reasons that I found Buddhism to be so compatible for me was that Buddhism really helped me to give language to experiences, like the experience of being human, like what is being human, right? You know, and so I think the tradition actually helped me to understand humanity, helped me to understand what it meant to be in a human body. It helped me to understand, you know, the differences of amongst the various types of life forms, you know, that we encounter, you know, in this world. And and Buddhism gave me a very clear thesis about what the purpose of my life was, you know, and that purpose was, it was actually twofold for me in my experience. And first, it was about getting liberated. It was about getting free from delusion. So actually embodying clarity, you know, that clarity helping me to see the nature, the essence of everything, you know. And secondly, that embodying of clarity for me was also an ethical mandate to free others from delusion. And for me, that is an ethical mandate that feeds directly into my work as a chaplain in spiritual care agent, you know, that I am here in relationship not only to other humans, but to my humanity. And those kinds of relationships to myself and to others is really about getting all of us free from delusion, you know. And for me, I translate getting free from delusion more, I guess, more strategically into the reduction of violence and harm against myself and against others. So if I were to use like secular language, that's the language I would use, is to reduce harm for myself. And I reduce harm by getting clear about what's happening.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yes, it is.
And also it's a hard thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Especially when then we layer on the constructs of race and racism and the delusion of white supremacy. I'd like to say delusion of white supremacy rather than white supremacy, because if the last 5 years hasn't proved that there's no such thing as white supremacy, nothing will. It's a delusion and it's harmful for everyone. So as a Black Buddhist, then we have the ethical obligation on top of ethical obligation, on top of ethical obligation, if I'm following you correctly, Lama Rod, to not just reduce harm, not just to awaken, not to just reduce harm, but also to understand the causes and conditions of the suffering that is caused by the constructs of race and the delusion of white supremacy and the harm inflicted on Black bodies. And I think some people might say, well, if I'm not Black, what's the relevance of this for me? I think the relevance as a spiritual caregiver, as a chaplain, is to understand that we don't all suffer in the same ways. And because we don't all suffer in the same ways, what is the ethical obligation of the chaplain, a spiritual caregiver, to understand this type of suffering? Regardless of how I identify, am I willing to invest in understanding the suffering imposed on externally, posed on Black bodies that couldn't be internalized too? Do I understand it? Am I willing to understand it? And then another ethical obligation or question is, am I willing to disrupt it?
Absolutely. You know, I think often about the work of Paulo Freire, you know, the pedagogy of the oppressed. And for me, that was a framework that I encountered early in my activism work in my 20s, you know, and, you know, Paulo Freire was, you know, really into radical education, transformative education, you know, this kind of grassroots organizing built around educating the most oppressed, you know, and his one thesis that, you know, that many of us, I think, heard and changed our activism was that it is up to the most oppressed to liberate the oppressor. You know, and for many of us, when we hear that, we say, no, absolutely not. Particularly if we're coming from an intersectionality of oppression, we're like, I have too much work to do already to survive, let alone trying to care for the people, the person who's most hurting me, you know? So after years of sitting with that and working with that, I began to understand that for those of us who are experiencing a lot of oppression, we're closer to the suffering. You know, we have this intimate relationship to harm, to violence, to struggle, right? And I think in many ways that places us even closer to this experience of being human, you know, and it awakens the experience of humanity when we begin to understand that suffering isn't just a personal issue, it is something that all beings are experiencing in some way, in different forms, in different levels, in different continuums, absolutely, but everyone's experiencing some form of this, right? And so there arises after this realization, this kind of ethical mandate, or, you know, ethical obligation to see that suffering in the experiences of others, right? And I think that seeing the experience of suffering has deeply influenced, you know, Black American communities around the issues of justice and love and compassion. And we've had great leaders emerge who have embodied that, you know, Dr. King, Harriet Tubman, just to name a few, you know, who have said, no, like it's about love, it's about liberation, you know, it's about loving people and wanting people to be free, you know, and knowing that people are struggling to be their most authentic self and being stuck in the delusions of white supremacy and the delusions of patriarchy and queerphobia and so forth and so on. These are delusions that only love can invite people out of, you know, and it's for those of us closest to the suffering of these oppressions, it is our labor that's going to lead this kind of awakening through love for all of us.
You know? Ooh, you said so much that I want to get into.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much like, where to begin? I'll start with what I think is central to being a chaplain, spiritual caregiver, which is the seeing, the suffering. You know, studies have come out about doctors not willing to see the suffering of Black people and not willing to accept their explanations of their very experiences of pain and suffering, consequently not getting the pain medications they need, because surely you're not as in much pain as you say you are. You're Black. Your people have, you know, for 400 years, I think all of this is going on in the subconscious. Your people for 400 years have endured slavery, you know, and all forms of violence. Come on now, suck it up. So you've got that going on. But what's really interesting about that for me is that these are supposedly our best and brightest people. And what impacts them, what makes it difficult for them to see us, I'm sure also exists in chaplains as well. Surely you're not hurting as much as you say you are, right? So then what makes it possible to see and accept and understand that pain? You're talking, Lama Rod, about being close to the pain, the suffering, like when in Charlottesville and throughout the world after George Floyd was tortured and murdered, people putting themselves on the line, and experiencing police brutality. I'm calling that at the moment jumping into Blackness.
Yeah.
Chaplains also who aren't Black need to jump into Blackness. Yeah.
There's a piece there, Ayo, about, you know, the ways in which Black pain is erased, you know, and yeah, it's about being close to one's suffering, but it's also about having to look at the ways in which Black folks haven't been allowed to be fully human within American social context. I would say across the diaspora, but like just like localized here in this culture, in American culture, I would say that like so much of our struggle is the struggle to be seen as human, you know. And I think about, I'm sure many people have seen this sign. It was a sign from a protest. It was a picture of a protest sign. I forget what era, what decade, but the sign just says, "I am a man." You know, I am a man. You know, and that basic statement, I'll just generalize it even more. I am human. Like, I deserve to be treated as a human. I deserve to be seen as someone who experiences pain and suffering and violence. You know, I deserve to be able to transcend the ways in which my ancestors were considered work animals, devoid of any experience of pleasure or pain. Like, I deserve to be considered a being who expresses the full range of emotions and thoughts and experiences. And that's, you know, that's these internalized biases that we bring into the work, you know, bring into chaplaincy, where we say, oh, you know, you know, even from our view, even I find myself as a Black chaplain spiritual care provider saying, oh, you know, these people aren't suffering as much as I am right now, you know. Yeah, so it can work in reverse. It's where I can actually downplay other people's pain because they're not Black or queer or whatever I may identify as being the most oppressed within society.
How do you disrupt that in the moment?
Yeah, yeah. It's coming back to the reflection that like all of us are struggling. Like all of us are struggling. Like every day, I swear, every single day when I go out and have to go out into the world, particularly when I have to go out into public places and people aren't masking, you know, and I get judgmental and I say, who do they think they are? I have to come back and say, you know, we're all struggling with something, you know, and I can't just judge someone for not doing something. Like, I have to put everyone's actions within a context, which is the same context I survive in, a context that's complex, and often very ambiguous and takes a lot of effort to make sense of. Yeah. And we're all struggling to do that.
It's good to remember.
Yeah.
Like I said, you said a whole lot of stuff before. But let me go back to one other thing, because I don't know if people will know this about you. As we are identifying ourselves as Black Buddhist practitioners, you are a Jesus-loving Black Buddhist practitioner, and so am I.
Yes.
And so when we think about pedagogy of the oppressed, and thinking about the resentments that arise, right, when it's said that it's the oppressed who has to conscientize the oppressor, it just reminds me of one of my favorite stories in the Bible, when Jesus encounters the Canaanite woman, you know, and right, and just, you know, that just, it's a story, it's a little snippet of a tale, but the power in that story when she awakens him to his bias, and then in turn he gives her everything that she desires. When I think about chaplaincy, I bring that back to chaplaincy, I think what is the ethical obligation that we have when we know that we are part of a group that has maybe a privilege that the person we are serving doesn't have? What is our obligation to be awakened by them? What position can we put ourselves in to be awakened by that person without putting the burden on them to do it? And then open in generosity. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to enter into relationships, interactions, wanting to be taught, and I think that's easy for us to move into kind of like spiritual care situations where we're the experts, and in my training in chaplaincy, it was so important for me to understand that like I'm showing up as a friend, and in Buddhism we have this term spiritual friend, and spiritual friend is like, how do we companion each other on the path towards awakening? It's not about me pulling you along, it's not about me teaching you anything, it's about me joining you and walking together towards somewhere where we're actually helping one another to understand the path and how to move forward. And having that perspective when we go and sit with someone, or we're having a session with someone where we're like, I'm just a friend. I may have a little bit more awareness and wisdom, but I'm still joining you as a friend on this path, and we're teaching each other. And in teaching, I'm not placing a burden on you. I'm just listening for the ways in which you're mirroring my work back to me. And I think particularly as chaplains, we're especially called to take that data and to really deepen around that data that we're getting in our interactions. And if we're not interested in doing that, then we're not interested in doing the real work of spiritual care.
Throwing down a truth claim right there. I don't know if I'm gonna touch it or not. I probably will later. Michael, did you want to jump in with anything?
I have so many questions, but I don't want to take over, because I could certainly take over with all the questions that I've got. Lama Rod, I just want to pick up. You had mentioned this concept of spiritual friendship, and this is so timely because just yesterday we published a book review on the Chaplaincy Innovation Lab website of Monica Sanford's new book, which is all about spiritual friendship. So folks, look in the chat. There's a link there to that book review, and so you can go check out Jamie B. There it is, right there. That's a lot bigger than I thought it was. There it is.
Wow.
So definitely go and check that out. I don't want to jump around too much, but you all just covered so much territory, and my head is spinning a little bit. But I want to go back to the very beginning, and I think that it's something that all chaplains deal with. And I don't want to make it so basic or superficial as self-care. But when you talk about awakening to the reality of the world and getting rid of delusions, we take that, and then we have over here the obligation to notice oppression and pain and suffering. How can a chaplain do that and not just go crazy? If you are completely aware to what is happening in the world, and you are ethically obliged to note the suffering, I mean, how do you even get out of bed in the morning?
Well, we did get out of bed today. I guess there's something there. I'll just say for me that I have to prioritize, right? I have to prioritize what I can be about, what I cannot be about, what I can give voice to, what I cannot give voice to, what I can write about, what I can't write about, who I can partner with, and who I cannot. And keep self-care number one. My promise to myself over these last 4+ years is remaining sane, doing everything that I can to remain sane, because I'm not used to, I love watching the news. I love watching political things, but I'm not used to being gaslighted throughout the day, every day of the year for 4+ years straight. That is something that I've had to did I just hear that? Readjust, right? Still have an appreciation for truth, be open to hearing that, and then, you know, dealing with the next gaslighting issue. So yeah, also, I firmly believe that self-preservation for people who are in targeted groups, self-preservation is a spiritual movement. It's a spiritual movement. So in order for me to be good for anything and anybody, I've got to be that for myself first. And also trust, because I have that kind of personality type. Let me put it this way. I've been working on my personality type of, if I don't do it, no one else will, right? That kind of thing. And what I have learned is that, oh no, there are countless people who will. You do your part, let them do their part. And I'll say this one last thing in terms of Buddhism and interdependence. Interdependence, interpenetration, no separation. When I do my part in the system, other parts will be impacted. When people do their part, we're all in the system, I will be impacted. And when I embraced that belief, that I think gave me a lot of energy to be able to get up and do my thing.
It's beautiful. Yeah, and Ayo, what I hear you really speaking on is the importance of boundaries.
Yeah.
As that one of the principal tools of self-preservation. Yeah, you know, and that's something that I also embrace, you know, also in my practice. You know, how do I get out of bed? It's about coming back and understanding what my work is. And that I think sometimes within Black communities, and I want to say particularly with Black, you know, with Black female identified folks in our community, there's this, you know, this belief that like we have to do. You know, I was raised by Black women, you know, and it was like, no, we need to do everything, you know, and it becomes a kind of a suffering. I see it as trauma, you know, that if I don't do it, it's not going to get done, you know. And so at this point in my life, and I see this with a lot of my older female family and relatives, it's getting to this place where it's like, you know what, I'm not going to try to do everything anymore, you know. And for me personally, it's understanding that like I have to let people do their own work, you know, that it's impossible for me to end white supremacy. You know, that's not my labor.
Don't say that. I've been counting on you.
You know, I'm like, you know, it's like, oh, like, no, it's my work to mirror the impact of this delusion of white supremacy back to the folks in which that delusion is mostly radiating from, you know. And so I mirror that by being myself, by setting boundaries, by taking care of myself, you know. And particularly in terms of practice, you know, I hold space for everything, right? It's going back to this really basic meditation practice that's noticing everything that's arising for me, allowing everything to be within the spaciousness of my mind, you know, and disrupting all this intense overreactivity to everything, you know. And what helps with that disrupting is by limiting actually what you're encountering, you know. So I don't sit in front of the news all day any longer. I'm not on emails. I'm not on social media 24/7. You know, like I take a step back and to create a space of self-care for myself in my own home and within my own relations, you know. And that is critical for all of us right now, you know, because I don't think I'm being called to be a martyr in this life. I think martyrdom is an important practice and offering, you know, but I don't think that's my offering right now. I think my offering is about being sustainable, you know, and embodying what wisdom and care and compassion look like in order to create the causes and conditions for my descendants to enter into a situation where they have the support and care that they need. You know?
Love that. I actually prefer that. I prefer that you're taking that approach than the martyrdom approach. I really do. Yeah. Look, Michael, it sounds like you were going to say something.
Well, all of this, when we hear it, this is wonderful, and it points the way to a brighter future if we could internalize all of this.
Right.
But one of the things that the Chaplaincy Innovation Lab and many people in the field in general is keenly aware of is that the fact is, from a numbers perspective, most chaplains look and believe a lot like me. It's been that way for a long time. If we could assume that the entire field, every chaplain in the country, was listening to us right now, what would change in the field if we internalize these lessons? How would things look different?
Oh, may I? Because I want to jump on something that Lama Rod said about spaciousness of my mind. The spaciousness of my mind. I want to say it one more time because it feels good. Spaciousness of my mind. The spaciousness of my mind, according to Buddhism, offers so much, right? It promotes psychological resiliency, which is necessary for having the long-term plan, the sustainable plan. And when we care for others, we know that sometimes we can become self-forgetting and burn out because we're not thinking about our needs because we're so busy thinking about other people's needs. So the spaciousness of our minds also includes us, keeping us in that spaciousness. The spaciousness of mind also brings to my mind the Noble Eightfold Path. And I'm thinking in particular, right mindfulness and right concentration. So sometimes we think about Buddhism as a religion, but it's so many things. Like it's a set of ethics that we talked about before. It's a philosophy, a way of life, and a psychology, art. And being Black and Buddhist can offer to chaplains across the board psychological tools for keeping a spacious mind. From my view as a pastoral counselor, pastoral psychotherapist, I think about the Noble Eightfold Path as like the original cognitive behavioral therapy. So just practicing spaciousness of mind contributes to chaplaincy self-care. Chaplaincy self-care promotes resiliency for being in a clinical setting, in a prison, in a college. And then I would say also outside of those contexts, because I think we all need to be working together as public practical theologians, public practical Buddhologists.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to be on the receiving end of the suffering, but we're not collected on the in the ways that we could intervene, right? In the ways that people are made to suffer. And I would like to see us move in that direction together.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, I think we'll see more diversity in the profession.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, I've certainly taken up plenty of time on my own questions, so let's turn directly to the audience. And there are many questions. I'm not going to try to impose a particular order or flow on them. I'm just going to kind of grab them out of the bag here. This one's really interesting. One of the privileges inherent in chaplaincy and caregiving is the choice to be in the setting, the chaplain's choice to be where they are. Patients, prisoners, homeless, or otherwise displaced people are not there by choice. How can we best engage that difference?
Mm-hmm. I'll just offer something. I think it's really, well, it's two things. I think first, it's really important. Well, it's been important for me to understand that my chaplaincy isn't about being in a certain time or place, that spiritual care and chaplaincy is something that I'm doing 24/7, because it's about embodying a practice that is about being as open and honest and authentic and compassionate as possible, you know. And so that's one thing. And the second thing, I think it's also important that we reflect as chaplains on the places where we've been put that has been outside of our consent, and to learn about what that feels like, and then to take that data and to empathize with others who have been put in places that they haven't consented to, and to try to show up in a way that maybe we needed others to show up for us when we've been in places outside of our consent. I just think for me, over and over and over again, it's about mining the data of my experiences, and disrupting this illusion of me and other. And again, a spiritual friendship, I'm showing up to accompany you. And there's in Buddhism, we have this tradition of spiritual sainthood, we call it the Bodhisattva tradition, the awakened, spiritual practitioner, the awakened change agent. The Bodhisattva goes where people are and where people need the support and the care. The Bodhisattva doesn't ask people to come to them. So we go and we accompany people in places and times where they need companionship. And that's all I think about. That's all I think about when I'm visiting folks in the hospital, or I'm going into the incarceration centers. It's like, no, I'm coming in to hold space for and to accompany folks, and that's it.
Yeah,
so that's really sorry, go ahead, Pamela.
Oh, no, Michael, you.
This is from earlier on, and it picks up on one of the phrases that you used.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michael, I'm sorry. You're going to a different question?
Yes, but please answer that one. No.
Okay, I want to ask Lama Rod what he thinks about this practice of Tonglen as a way of exchanging self for other and engaging difference.
Yeah. And I think Tonglen is one of these really profound practices that I think where Tonglen is actually helping us to stay present. As I am moving into spaces and situations, I want to stay present and to hold space for what's coming up for me, the fear, the anxiety, the confusion. Tonglen helps us to stay in a relationship to that. It helps us to stay also in a relationship to what the other person may be experiencing as well. And it helps us to get back to that spaciousness, so we're not reacting and getting distracted by the anxiety. We see the anxiety, we feel the anxiety, but there's a lot of space for us to be present as well with those whom we're with. And that's the spirit of Tonglen, I think.
Yeah, I do too. Tonglen, Tonglen, for people who don't know it. It's a meditation practice. In essence, you're imagining that you're breathing in the suffering of others and that you're breathing out relief of that suffering. And what I have found psychologically and in an embodied way, it's really breaking down the impulse to defend against the experience of another and separate yourself from them. So, yeah.
So the question has to do with the phrase that you used earlier, and it's really interesting. How do you suggest chaplains jump into Blackness? I am a Black chaplain in healthcare. I really want to know if providing spiritual support to a Buddhist or Black Buddhist is any different from providing spiritual care to anyone else.
Wow. Thank you for that question. Lama Rod, do you want to begin?
No, you go ahead. What's on your mind?
Here's another thing I love about Buddhist practice, and this is in philosophy. This comes mostly out of, from my view, Zen practice, which is don't know mind. Mm-hmm. It may be in Tibetan as well. Mm-hmm. There's no way I can answer that question. How can anyone know what that dynamic is going to be between that chaplain and that person they are with? It is beyond the concepts that we've been speaking about today. Yeah. A Black person can encounter a self-hating Black person, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. A Christian can, if they're Christian or whatever, non-Buddhist can, as you can see, us Jesus-loving Buddhists can relate to Christians as well as Buddhists. Hopefully, though, what we have in common is a love and respect for human beings, a willingness to listen, feel, and learn. But sometimes some people need more than that. Mm-hmm. They may need a representation mm-hmm. of their faith tradition mm-hmm. to inspire hope and confidence and belonging. They may need a ritual mm-hmm. that means something to them, right? Mm-hmm. And so the chaplain has to ask themselves, am I the person who represents that for this yeah. person, yeah. right? And if not, let me find that person who does. Yeah. Who can yeah. engage in those rituals with authenticity.
Yeah, and I would, one of the things when I was doing hospital chaplaincy, one of the things that I struggled with the most was doing rounds, and just walking to rooms and not knowing what you're walking into and who you're walking into relationship with, but just showing up and saying, whatever happens, happens. All I can do is just have and practice spaciousness, openness, compassion, and then I trusted that spaciousness to kind of help me to navigate the relationship that I was creating with someone on the spot. And you just don't know, and I think it's really important for us to say, what, this is all that I can do. I can just be myself, hold space and listen, and then I am also, part of my work too is to connect people to other resources that are much more appropriate for what they need as well, and to do that joyfully and not to assume that like we're supposed to be everything to everyone.
There's a question here on we get into the perception of suffering and the assumption of, oh, you can't be suffering that much, or you're not suffering as much as me, all the different permutations of that question. And I'm gonna modify, Diana, I'm gonna modify your question just a little bit and expand it out a little bit. I'm wondering if either of you have come into contact in specifically, this is about healthcare, with practitioners who are aware of this as an issue in their field. And I mean doctors, nurses, people involved in the physical side of it. If they are aware of this and have worked to overcome it, have worked to address it, and some good examples of that, or is this just not even in the conversation?
It's in the conversation because I've heard people talk about it, but I personally have not had a conversation with a healthcare professional who has admitted that they think Black people have thicker skin, thicker blood, I don't know, different shaped head, brain is configured differently, and therefore they experience life differently, so I don't give them pain medication. Right. They don't, I haven't heard anybody actually articulate that yet. We know it happens. Recently in Indiana, Carmel, Indiana, there was a Black doctor yeah. with COVID who asked for a different kind of medical treatment. She documented this in social media. She didn't get that treatment, and she died. And so this is part of our culture, and I think it's incumbent upon us as chaplains to not be so concerned about whether anyone is actually admitting it, but to say that we know that Black people experience health disparities on a scale that just recently, because of COVID, because of paying attention to COVID, we've become more and more aware of. So let's pay attention and let's take people seriously, all people.
Yes.
Ayo, that specific incident that you mentioned was in the news a lot here. I'm in northern Indiana, and so that was well, there's a lot to say about that. But another question has to do with that, and I think it gets to kind of the chaplains can get stuck in this unfortunate position, this awkward position. And Brent, I'm going to distill your question down quite a bit here, so I apologize if I missed the spirit, but I don't think I am here. What can a chaplain do to address that kind of problem? I'm thinking, if I'm a chaplain and I see something like that happening, if I have a Black patient that's saying, I have told my doctor this 8 times and they're not fixing it, do something. What is a chaplain to do?
Well, you know, just thinking about the way hospital chaplaincy is set up, and I go to my supervisor. You know, like that's not something that I can actually go to a doctor to talk about. I have to go through a channel. You know, and hospital settings are they're very hierarchical. There's a lot of procedures, a lot of boundaries, you know, and sometimes as a chaplain in a hospital, sometimes you're considered other than. At least you know, we were just like these spiritual people who walked around and just sat and talked with people all day, you know. And at that moment, you know, yes, I think part of our work is to advocate when we see something out of balance, but to go through the proper channels, you know, to take that to our supervisor, you know, to share what we've seen and heard. And that's the best that we can do, you know, unless the doctor actually comes to us directly, you know, which would be another opening.
And let's not forget the ethics committee.
Yeah.
So take it to the ethics committee. But I'll say this in terms of like being proactive. Let's just say this is how it is. Okay, we don't have to wait for a situation to arise. This is how it is. In the intercultural competency courses that I've taught, we do a role play where chaplains practice educating their colleagues about intercultural competency and working towards intercultural competency. And so in their boardroom are social workers, doctors, nurses, and so on. And so they are asked to give their best pitch as to why they should up the obligation to be more aware about discrimination, oppression, and how it impacts people. And I'll just say this as a story. So, you know, we just think these are role plays. This is good. It's not going anywhere. They'll get a grade, and that's the end of it. One of the students was already working for an organization, and they were asked to give a presentation on inclusion and diversity, equity, and so on. So they used the role play as a model for their presentation, which ended up attracting $10,000 to their organization. So I say that to say I'm really about reminding students, chaplaincy students, that they are moral authority figures and should act like it.
And I'm just reminded of a very interesting situation that I had in a hospital placement once, where I had a coworker and also a friend who was read as white, but was actually Black identified. You know, so she had access to conversations and spaces where people just assumed she was white. you know, and that's just kind of the reality of race, right? You know, race is a construct, you know, so it's not so much about physical appearance, it's about, okay, experiences. You know, she was actually, you know, she was biracial. Her, you know, her father was Black, her mother was white. She passed as white, and she would be able to share all these situations with me where she would be like, listen, this floor, this is what happens to Black patients on this floor. You need to know that and understand that when you're walking this floor, you know, or this particular, you know, nurse or this particular doctor, this is my experience of how they're relating to Black patients because they just do things around me, assuming. And I'm white, you know, and those, having conversations with folks like that and sharing those experiences, I think is so importantly helpful, you know, and particularly, and I felt like this colleague and friend was actually doing good work to disrupt that, because she would definitely speak up and say, well, I need to challenge that, that assumption that you're making. You know, she would advocate for folks, you know, but we can all do that. You know, in spaces like white identity, you don't have to identify in a certain way. You can learn to hear this and disrupt it on the spot and say, no, actually, let's think about this instead.
That's a great place to connect to what I think is going to probably be our last question. And it's a good last question because multiple people have asked it. And so this is a good opportunity to grapple with it. I think it threw many of us for a loop when you said white supremacy is a delusion, because I've got lots of folks in the chat saying, but pain and suffering is real, caused by this. So please help us understand this better.
Yes. Okay. So what I meant when I said white supremacy is a delusion, I didn't mean that hatred and the manifestations of hatred aren't real and don't hurt. What I meant was when you put those two words together, white supremacy, you've got to know that that's a delusion. One, white is a construct. Supremacy is a construct. And if there was such a thing as white supremacy for real, like really white people are really supreme, then we wouldn't be living in this, Lama Rod, I'm gonna say it, we wouldn't be living in this apocalypse.
Yep.
Right? This apocalypse that we are living in right now is very much connected to the policies of people who believe in white supremacy. Mm-hmm. So I hope I made myself clear. The suffering is real. The pain is real. The violence is real. Mm-hmm. But the belief in supremacy, based on anything, really, even human supremacy, is a delusion. Yeah. I believe.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we need to get clear about how we're choosing suffering in ways that we don't have to be doing. You know, there will always be pain. You know, no matter what, you're going to experience pain. That's part of being a human body. We're going to experience pain. But suffering is this other thing, you know, that we have a lot of agency in. You know, and I think that's where Buddhism is really important, because Buddhism comes along with the science of the mind and also of the body, but a lot of the mind that begins to help us to kind of cut through the experience of suffering, discomfort, like that. You know, the layer on top of the pain that we get really wrapped up in. You know, and I think white supremacy is a delusion that we're choosing. You know, and that's perpetuating suffering. Now, you may not be connected to that suffering, like you may not feel that suffering, but that suffering is there, you know, and that suffering is definitely present for those of us who are the recipients of that delusion, of you know, of that violence. But what we're trying to do in getting clearer and wiser and more compassionate is to stop choosing the superiority, choosing the otherness, you know, and coming back into humanity. where we're sharing an experience with all humans in a moment, and not trying to differentiate ourselves by elevating ourselves away from folks, but being with.
And may I have an invitation in closing, an invitation to chaplains. What will be what ethical obligation will we take upon ourselves to enlighten people burdened by the delusion of white supremacy? Wherever we are, whatever we're doing, because we see there is a movement. There is a movement to impose the old ways of whites on top, everybody else below. There's a movement afoot that is violent. And what will our role be in disrupting that movement? Maybe we can work together on that as chaplains.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you both. And I want to remind everyone that the genesis of this webinar was the book that you just published. So everyone, go buy the book, go read the book. If you need a gift for your beloved for Valentine's Day, it's the perfect gift. You can buy it, you know, everywhere. So make sure that you go and do that.
You know, while you're talking, I'm going to do this too.
Oh, there you go. And there is Lama Rod's book right there. Wonderful. And Ayo has just one or two things that she's written elsewhere as well. So you should go and peruse that. So thank you all for joining us. A special thank you to our guest, Ayo Yetunde and Lama Rod Owens, and Cheryl Giles, who couldn't be with us, but I thank her for her willingness to be with us anyway. I'll remind everyone that this was recorded. You can always go back and watch and listen again. And I know I got comments saying, I want to go back and watch this again, or I need to show this to my team or whatever. So I know that this is going to get a couple of replays in various places. Keep an eye out for our link to that recording and to the survey. I'd appreciate it if you would spend a couple of minutes filling that out. Until then, thank you all very much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, and we will look forward to seeing everyone soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.